You know that moment when you realize you're doing all the right things to heal, but you still feel stuck, like you're reading the books, saying the affirmations, maybe even going to therapy, and yet something in your chest is still clenched. I've been there. And what I learned the hard way is this: healing isn't just about what you do. It's about where you're doing it. Because some places don't just hold memories, they keep reopening wounds. And I don't mean just a house or a job or a relationship. I mean a pattern, a role you keep playing, a story you keep living inside. Sometimes the bravest, most loving thing you can do for yourself is to step out of the environment that taught your nervous system to stay on guard. Not because you're weak, but because you're ready. So today I want to talk about this truth we don't say out loud enough. You can't heal in the same place that hurt you, and that doesn't make you disloyal. It makes you honest. The body keeps receipts, even when the mind wants to move on. And I know that sounds like one of those phrases you see on a mug or an Instagram post, but I mean it in the most practical, lived-in way possible. Because so many of us try to heal like we're doing a home renovation in our heads. We say, I've forgiven, I understand what happened, I've made peace. And maybe we have, intellectually. Maybe our thoughts are trying to move forward with a kind of hope and grit that I genuinely admire. But then we walk back into the same room, the same conversation, the same dynamic, and our chest tightens, our stomach drops, our shoulders rise up to our ears before we even know why. And we're sitting there thinking, what is wrong with me? I thought I was past this. Nothing is wrong with you. Your body is doing exactly what it was designed to do. It's trying to keep you safe based on what it has learned before. Your nervous system is not out here making moral judgments about your growth. It's simply tracking patterns. It remembers tone, timing, looks, silences, the way a door shut, the way your name was said when someone was angry, the way you had to scan a room to feel okay. That's not weakness. That's wisdom coded into your biology. Here's what research keeps showing us about stress and trauma. The brain and body store the emotional and sensory parts of painful experiences in a different way than the logical story we tell ourselves about them. So you might say, that was years ago, and your body says, I know, but last time this happened, you got hurt. So let's stay ready. Environmental cues, even subtle ones, can activate that threat response automatically. Not because you're dramatic, not because you're stuck, but because your system is trying to prevent a repeat. And when the environment that hurt you is still the environment you're trying to heal inside, you end up doing a kind of double labor. You're telling yourself to be open while your body is bracing. You're trying to practice trust while your nervous system is scanning for danger. You're reaching for calm while everything around you is whispering, remember. That's exhausting. That's why people feel like healing is failing them. It's not failing you. You're just trying to grow a garden in soil that keeps getting salted. I've watched this play out in my own life and in countless conversations with people who are trying so hard to be brave. We don't need more self-criticism on top of a wound. We don't need to muscle through our own alarm system. What we need is to understand that safety is not a reward we get after healing. Safety is often the starting line of healing. So if you're in a place where your body can't relax, where you're always on edge, where your nervous system never gets to exhale, that's not a character flaw. It's a signal. It might be telling you gently but firmly that something has to change. Not because you're incapable of healing, but because healing requires room to breathe. And your body knows that before your mind is ready to admit it. Staying where you were hurt can quietly turn healing into self-betrayal. And I want to say that slowly because it's one of those truths that can feel a little sharp when it lands, not because you don't know it, but because you've probably spent a lot of time trying not to know it. Sometimes we stay in the place that hurt us because we're loyal, or because we're hopeful, or because leaving feels like admitting it was real. Sometimes we stay because we're scared that if we walk away, we'll prove the story we were taught about ourselves, that we're too sensitive, too difficult, too much. And sometimes we stay because this is what we've always called love or family or success or belonging, even when it's costing us our breath. But here's the quiet part that's so dangerous. When you stay in a harmful environment long enough, healing starts to look like you constantly adjusting yourself to survive it. You call it growth, but it's actually shrinking. You call it being mature, but it's actually silencing. You call it forgiveness, but it's actually forgetting your own needs to keep the peace. And I'm not saying every hard place is a place you have to leave. Life is hard, relationships are hard, work is hard, but there's a difference between hard and harmful. Hard stretches you, but it doesn't break your sense of self. Harmful teaches you that your boundaries are negotiable, that your feelings are inconvenient, that love requires you to disappear a little at a time. If you find yourself rehearsing conversations in your head before you have them just to avoid backlash, if you're monitoring your tone, your face, your needs, your joy, if your healing requires you to be smaller so someone else can be comfortable, that is not healing. That is survival dressed up in a nicer outfit. And look, I get it. There's grief here because walking away from what hurt, you can feel like you're walking away from what you wanted it to be. The marriage you hoped would soften, the family you hoped would see you, the job you hoped would finally value you, the friend you hoped would stop wounding you by accident. Letting go of the fantasy can feel like another loss stacked on top of the original hurt. But staying doesn't keep you safe from loss. It just makes the loss happen slowly inside your own skin. It turns you against yourself in tiny, daily ways. You stop trusting your gut. You stop naming what you need. You stop honoring what you feel. And that's where self-betrayal grows. Not in one dramatic moment, but in 1,000 quiet compromises. Healing asks for your honesty first. Not perfection, not politeness. Honesty. The kind that says, this is hurting me, even if other people don't agree. The kind that says, I can love you and still not be able to heal here. The kind that says, my well-being is not a collateral damage I'm willing to keep paying. Because you deserve more than a life where your healing depends on your ability to tolerate heartbreak. You deserve a life where healing is supported, not sabotaged. And if staying means abandoning yourself, then leaving is not the betrayal. Staying is. Distance is not punishment. Distance is clarity. And I know that can sound almost too clean, too simple, especially if you've been taught that stepping back is selfish or dramatic or disloyal. A lot of us grew up in families, workplaces, relationships where closeness was the currency of goodness. If you stayed close, you were loving. If you pulled away, you were the problem. So when we start to need distance, we don't just feel sad, we feel guilty. We feel like we're doing something wrong. But distance, real healthy distance, is not a weapon. It's not a threat. It's not you slamming the door and saying, fine, I'm done forever. Most of the time, it's you saying, I need to breathe long enough to hear my own voice again. Because here's what happens when you're inside the hurt place all the time. Your perspective shrinks to survival size. You're not asking, what do I want? You're asking, what do I need to do to get through this day without getting hurt again? And those are two very different questions. One is about living. The other is about enduring. Think about it like this. If you've ever tried to read a label from 2 inches away, you know you can't make out the words. You just see blur. That's what being too close to pain does. It blurs the truth. You can't tell where you end and where the hurt begins. You can't tell what's yours to carry and what never belonged to you in the first place. You can't even tell what's actually happening because your nervous system is busy keeping watch. Distance gives you the ability to see, not to judge, not to punish, to see. From a little farther back, the patterns become visible. The way you keep apologizing for the same thing, the way your stomach drops before every conversation, the way you become a version of yourself you don't recognize just to keep the peace, the way you're doing all the emotional labor while calling it being strong. When you're inside it, that can feel normal. When you step back, you go, oh, this is the water I've been swimming in. And that clarity matters because healing requires truth, not the truth you can perform, the truth you can feel in your bones. Sometimes distance is the only way to access that truth because proximity keeps you tangled in the old story. Now, I want to say something gently but clearly. Distance is not the same as bitterness. People will try to confuse those two. They'll say, if you really forgave, you wouldn't need space. Or if you were stronger, you could handle this. That's not how healing works. Forgiveness and boundaries are not enemies. You can forgive someone and still not trust them with your heart. You can care about people and still need a gap between you and what hurts. That's not cruelty. That's wisdom. Distance can also be temporary. Sometimes we step back to reset, to get our feet under us, to stop reacting and start choosing. And sometimes in that distance, we realize we're not going back, not because we're angry, but because we finally see what it costs us to stay. Clarity has a way of rearranging your loyalties. It brings you home to yourself. So if you're in that in-between place right now, where distance feels scary, but staying feels like drowning, just know this: stepping back doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you a person who is paying attention to what you need to heal. And that is brave. You are allowed to outgrow roles that were built in your pain. And I know that sentence might land like both relief and grief at the same time, because if you're anything like me, you didn't just wake up one day and choose those roles. You earned them. You survived by them. They were the ways you made it through what you couldn't control. Maybe you became the strong one because nobody else was. The one who held it together, who didn't fall apart, who could be counted on no matter what was happening inside. Maybe you became the peacemaker, the fixer, the one who could read the room in 2 seconds and adjust your whole personality to keep things calm. Maybe you became the achiever, the responsible one, the counselor in the family, the easy friend, the one who never needs too much. Those roles are not random. They are intelligent adaptations to pain. But here's the catch. What saves us in the middle of hurt can start to suffocate us long after the danger is gone. The armor that kept you safe at 10 or 20, or in that one season you thought would break you, can become a cage when you are trying to live wholeheartedly now. Let me say it this way. Sometimes we confuse consistency with loyalty to ourselves. We say, this is just who I am. But very often what we mean is, this is who I had to be. And healing is this slow, brave process of separating those two. Who you are at your core is still there, but who you had to be to survive might not be who you want to be to thrive. And I know that outgrowing those roles can feel terrifying, because when you stop being the strong one, you have to face your own tenderness. When you stop being the fixer, you have to let other people hold their own stuff. When you stop being the one who never needs anything, you have to risk needing. And needing, for a lot of us, is where shame shows up. Shame says, if you need, you're a burden. If you change, you'll lose love. If you stop performing, you won't belong. That's the old wiring. That's the hurt place talking. Because real belonging doesn't demand that you keep wearing the armor that came from your wounds. There's also grief here, and we don't talk about that enough. Grief for the version of you who got you through. Grief for the praise you got for playing that role so well. Grief for the relationships that might shift when you stop showing up the same way. Sometimes people like us better when we are predictable in our pain. They know how to be near us as long as we stay in the part we've always played. And when we start changing, they can get uncomfortable. They might call it selfish. They might call it dramatic. But often what they're really saying is, your growth is disrupting the system we had. And that's a hard moment, because you're standing there thinking, wait, I'm doing this healing thing. Why does it feel like I'm losing people? And the answer is not that healing is wrong. It's that healing is honest. It tells the truth about what fits and what doesn't, about who can meet you in your wholeness and who only knows how to be with you in your shrinking. So if you're in that place where you feel yourself outgrowing an old role, please don't shame yourself for it. Honor it. Thank the part of you that learned how to survive, and then gently, bravely, let yourself become someone who doesn't have to survive anymore. You don't owe your pain a lifetime contract. You are allowed to change. You are allowed to be more than what happened to you. leaving the hurt place is not the end of love. It's the beginning of belonging. And I can feel how tender that is even as I say it, because for so many of us, the word leaving gets tangled up with failure. We hear leaving and we think quitting. We hear leaving and we think abandonment. We hear leaving and we think, if I walk away, does that mean none of it mattered? But most of the time, leaving isn't a rejection of love. It's a refusal to keep calling pain home. Let's be honest about something. A lot of us have been taught that love equals endurance, that if you love a place, a person, a community, you prove it by staying no matter what. You absorb the hurt, you rationalize the behavior, you keep showing up smaller and quieter and more careful. And then we call that loyalty. We call that character. We call that being the bigger person. But if belonging costs you your self-respect, your boundaries, your nervous system, your voice, that's not belonging. That's bargaining. That's you paying rent to stay in a space that keeps wounding you. Real belonging is not something you buy with your suffering. Real belonging is something that meets you when you show up as you are, doesn't demand that you twist into someone more convenient. It doesn't punish you for having needs. It doesn't make you earn your place by tolerating heartbreak. Belonging says, there you are. Not, prove you deserve to be here. And here's what I've learned, watching people walk away from what hurts them. Leaving often looks like heartbreak on the outside, but on the inside, it's a return. It's a return to your own skin, your own values, your own truth. Sometimes the most loving act you can offer yourself is to stop participating in a story that requires you to stay wounded, to stay connected. Now, does leaving mean you stop loving? No. Love can outlive proximity. Love can be real and still not be safe. Love can be deep and still not be healthy. We are capable of holding those complexities, even though we'd rather not. It's so much simpler to say, if I love you, I'll stay. Or, if I leave, I never loved you. But that's not human. That's not life. Life is messy and nuanced and heartbreaking and beautiful all at once. Sometimes leaving is what finally creates the conditions for love to become something better, even if that love changes form. And sometimes leaving is what makes room for a different kind of love altogether. The love that doesn't come with a price tag attached to your dignity. And let's talk about the fear underneath all of this, because when people consider leaving the hurt place, what they're really asking is, will I be alone? Will I still matter? Will I find somewhere I fit? That fear is real. Our brains are wired for connection. We would rather stay in familiar pain than risk unfamiliar loneliness. That's not weakness. That's being human. But healing does something powerful here. It resets your compass. It teaches you to recognize what safe connection feels like. Not perfect connection. Safe. The kind where you can exhale, the kind where your joy isn't suspicious. The kind where you don't have to translate your pain into something palatable to be taken seriously. So when you leave what hurts, you're not walking away from belonging. You're walking toward it. You're saying, I want the kind of life where I can be whole. And that is not selfish. That is sacred work. You don't have to stay loyal to what is breaking you. You get to choose what helps you heal. And you get to find a place that feels like home. So here's where I want to leave you. If you're sitting with this idea and feeling that mix of fear and relief, that is a really good sign. It means you're listening to yourself. It means some part of you is done pretending that healing is supposed to happen in spaces that keep you braced, small, or silent. You are not failing because your body reacts. You are not weak because you need distance. You are not disloyal because you've outgrown what once held you. You're human, and you're learning the difference between surviving and living. That's brave work. And maybe the hardest part of all of this is trusting that stepping away from what hurt you is not abandoning love. It's choosing belonging. The belonging that lets you breathe. The belonging that doesn't demand you earn your place by suffering. The belonging where you don't have to wear armor just to be accepted. If you decide to leave a place, a pattern, a role, or a relationship that keeps wounding you, please remember this. Leaving is not the opposite of love. Leaving can be an act of love for yourself. And sometimes it's the only way to tell the truth about what you need in order to heal. Take it one honest step at a time. Let your body lead you toward safety. Let your heart lead you toward wholeness. Let your boundaries be the bridge to a life that feels like yours again. You don't have to do this perfectly. You just have to do it truthfully. Good luck.